I'll merge plot, and so the other jet is on my left-hand side, and I'm gonna go to a clock code to make it simple. So the object we're gonna end up looking for is right in the middle of the clock, and we are at the 6 o'clock position, and my wingman is off to my left side, so she's further down with her Wizzo. So as we're looking around, we look to the right, and yesterday was a perfect example out here. The water is perfectly calm, no white caps. I mean, it's literally a perfect San Diego, California day. And we see white water, something like if you see a seamount, rock underwater when you're standing on the shore and the waves are breaking over it, and you're like, what is that? It's usually because there's a rock under the water. So it looks like that, but it's about the size of a 737. It actually kind of has a shape of like a cross, and it's pointing to the east. So you've got the long part going east-west, and you got a couple of things going north and south. So as we're looking at it, because that kind of draws our eyes, we're like, oh, that's kind of odd. We look down, and the Wizzo in the other airplane comes up and says, hey, skipper, do you? And that's about what he gets out of his mouth. And I'm kind of looking at the same thing. I go, dude, do you see that? What is that thing? And what we see is this white tic-tac looking object just above the surface of the water, pointing north-south, and it's going north-south, east-west. It's just radically moving forward, back, left, right at will. And it's moving around the disturbance, the white water that we see.
How big is this thing?
So, over time, it's about 40 feet long. And the way I estimate that is, I got a lot of time fighting other airplanes, so it's about the size of a Hornet fuselage. So that's why you say 40 feet. And this thing's just going left. So the first thing you see when you look down, you go, and this is with our eyes, it's not sensors, right? So we're looking down at this thing, and first thing you think is helicopter, right? Helicopters typically stay below 200 feet when we're out there, and they're just driving around. We're pretty far away from the ship for a helicopter for one of ours. So what is it? So the first thing you look for is rotor wash. If you've watched any TV show that starts kicking the water up, and you can see that it's really easy to see from the air. So we're like, no rotor wash. Matter of fact, don't see any rotors. Don't see any tail rotor. Don't see any, the main rotors. We're like, that's kind of weird. So as we're driving around, we're looking at this thing. We get to about the 9 o'clock position.
How far away are you from this thing?
I'm at 20,000 feet, and it's right down on the surface, right off our right side. So I'm probably maybe a couple miles lateral and 20,000 feet, and we're just watching it move around. And
so it's very small in your eyes.
Not overly small. An airplane down that low, it's 40 feet. You can see pretty well. It was pretty clear. So I'm like, okay. So I said, I'm gonna go check it out. That's what we're trained to do. The other pilot says, hey, I'm gonna stay up here, and I'm like, that's perfect. So now we'll get some separation. We'll get it from different views, and the other airplane will kind of have a God's eye view of everything that's going on as I go down and check this thing out. So I start driving around, and it's still doing its forward, back, left, right. It's still pointing north-south. We get to about the 12 o'clock position. I'm just in a nice, easy descent. And a reason, because I've been asked, could you go more aggressive? You can, but when you're out over water, the water looks the same at 20,000 feet as it does at 2,000 feet. You don't, so you can easily put yourself in a non-recoverable position if you're not paying attention and you go into the water. So I got this nice, easy descent. I get to about 12 o'clock, and as I'm coming down, I could guess probably about 18,000 feet now, a couple thousand feet below the other airplane. The tic-tac just kind of rapidly goes boop and turns, so now it's kind of pointing east-west, and now it mirrors us. So it's above the surface, we're up high, we're coming down, it starts coming up. I'm like, well, this is getting interesting. So we kind of drive all the way around a circle, I'm descending, it's coming up, and I get over to about the 8 o'clock position on the clock, and it's over at about the 2 o'clock position. Well, the quickest way, as we know as kids, to get someone, you can keep going around the circle. Nothing's going to happen. You cut across the circle. So I'm about, probably 2,000 to 3,000 feet above it, and I just kind of drop my nose aggressively, and I cut across the circle, and it's coming this way. It's because I'm trying to fly to where it's going to be, because I want to join on it. I want to see how close I can get to it.
Right.
And as I'm pulling up, it's kind of starting to cross my nose, and it starts to accelerate, and within about less than a second, as I start to pull nose onto it and it crosses right in front of me, it just goes poof and it's gone. So I call the other airplane. I said, hey, do you guys see that thing? And they're like, sir, it's gone. We don't see it at all. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird. So we don't see it. We're looking. At the same time, I say, hey, let's turn around and let's go back to see what was in the water. Was there something there? So we turn around. We're right there. We haven't gone anywhere. It's gone. Water's perfectly, there's no white water, nothing. It's just blue. We're like, okay. So we turn back around. Now we're heading back out towards the east. And I tell the controller, I said, I first said, I'm kind of weirded out. And I told my backseater that. And we start heading back, and the the controller on the Princeton comes up and he says, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is back at your cap point." That was our original point where we were going to hold 40 miles south of the ship. So this thing has went from wherever we were at to, about 60 miles in, maybe 30, 40 seconds. It's already over there. And and they didn't track it. It just appeared. It shows back up on their radar and they go, "It's here." So we're like, okay. So we fly back. We don't see it. We don't see it on our radar. We don't see it on any of our sensors. We do like 2 runs and we come back to the ship and land. So as we're in we call it the PR shop. We're taking off our flight gear. One of my crews is getting ready to go out, and I think they were going to be on a tanker mission, but they had a targeting pod on board. So they launch off, and we're telling them about this before, and the backseater, Chad, says he's really determined he's going to find this thing. So he tells the pilot, "Hey, we're going to find this thing." So they're just out driving around, and in the back seat of a Super Hornet, there's no stick, but there's side stick controllers, and they're to control the sensors because that's what the weapon systems guys do. And they can change displays really fast by just hitting a button, and it'll flip from the radar to the targeting pod. And the way the system actually works is when you see something on the radar and you designate it as your primary target, all the other sensors will look at that point. So everything is kind of synced together. So he picks up a hit on his radar, and he goes to lock it up, because I watched all the tapes. He goes to lock it up, and immediately the radar can tell, it gets signals back that it's being jammed. So, and technically jamming is an act of war. It starts jamming the radar, goes into a jam extrapolate, a bunch of stuff happens on the scope. Well, he's smart enough to castle to his targeting pod, and he takes a passive track, and that's the video that you see of the Tic Tac where it's just sitting in the middle of the screen real quiet. So he does that, and he goes through, if you watch the video, if we had it, I'd go through it with you, but they go through all the different modes. So he goes, it's an IR and an EO. EO is TV. It's black and white TV camera.
We can get the video, right, online?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's get the video, Jamie. Where would you